Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wine with Women. Once again, I have a sign, lest you forget where you are for the next hour, where we get to chat to some of the most amazing women who have found themselves, like many of us, just suddenly working to advance the right of women and girls. And tonight, I've got the most wonderful guest. I'm very excited. She really doesn't need much of an introduction. She is a journalist and the author of Trans, When Ideology Meets Reality, Helen Joyce.
Hello, other Helen.
Welcome, welcome. One of the other Helens.
One of the many Helens. It is the turf
yes,
name.
Indeed. Yes, we are that. We are
legion. We are legion.
Helen's of a certain age, I think.
There's some young ones. I've met the occasional young Helen.
Oh, that's nice. It's good to know that the name has actually probably just come back round into fashion.
Yeah. Okay. Moving swiftly on, Helen.
So, Ricky Gervais.
I know. What a relief. What a huge relief. I think it's so important for the social contagion side of things, because this sort of, identifying out of being a boring cis white straight person, well, if people are going to laugh at it, it's not that I think that we should all be mocking people, and I couldn't do it, but if people think it's not cool and they think that it's a joke, they won't do it.
Do you know, I hadn't actually thought of it from that aspect.
I think it's the most important bit.
Yeah, no, I think you've made an excellent point there. It's yes, he's made it not cool now.
Yeah, him and Bill Maher, of course. And it's very important to say that neither of them were laughing at people. They weren't punching down. They were talking about an ideology. Debbie Hayton has a piece that's just come out in The Spectator, which I think Debbie got to talk to Ricky for, so I'm very jealous of that. But anyway, Ricky says that, it's not punching down, and what he's talking about is the ideology, not the people. And the thing is, the ideology is absolutely hysterical. Like, the effects aren't funny, like people getting sterilized and women losing their medals and all that, that's not funny. But this bit that we all have to pretend that we can look at somebody with a beard and a cock and balls and say that this is a woman, that's hysterical.
Yes.
I've been dying for people to puncture it.
Absolutely right. Yes. In fact, what was really quite telling about the whole piece, and I know we've all said this because we all saw it immediately, which is he's almost quoting verbatim from a Twitter thread. He's not made his own jokes up there about sort of trans people themselves. He is literally just parroted what is happening to women and girls every day.
And I thought, that use of the word dinosaurs, that was very telling. That just showed me he's been listening quietly for a while. He's been paying attention.
He has. And you say that you were jealous of Hayden. We're not jealous of you because, some of us were jealous that Ricky Gervais had liked their tweets. You got a reply.
And then he went, I know. I was like, oh my God, does he follow me? And he does. So I've been thinking, how long has he been following me? Oh my God. Oh God, we're so sad, Helen.
So sad. We can be sad here. It's okay.
Yeah, it's tragic.
We're all sad together. Yeah. We're just a little corner of women just having a chat about this. So back to what you're saying, I do think that social contagion thing is interesting, but I mean, for me, what I saw of it was just the fact that now, he's got the word turf out into the mainstream. Now, presumably it's already mainstream, which is why he feels that it's the right time for him to be able to say it. But there are, so there's enough people who understand the word because, they were all laughing, etc. But there will be now some thinking, what is he talking about? What is this that's going on? And we'll hopefully have a look into it and see.
Yeah, see, I don't think that I think that for quite a while now, this has not been about consciousness raising. That's been irrelevant. That was important 2 or 3 years ago when there weren't enough people, but there've been enough people to be critical mass, to be funding the crowdfunders, to be writing letters to MPs, all that sort of thing, to have a movement, to have support for women and men, of course. I mean, there's people like Graham, of course, as well, who've got their necks stuck out on this. We can't win this by saying, there's 60x million people in this country and we've got to persuade all of them or a great majority of them. We've got to get through to the decision makers. And in the meantime, while we're trying to get through to the decision makers, we have to try to limit the harm. And that means reducing or keeping down the number of people who transition. And that's for 2 reasons. One of them is that every one of those people is a person who's been damaged. But the second one is every one of those people is basically, a huge problem to a sane world. Like, if you've got people that, and whether they're transitioned, whether they're happily transitioned, whether they're unhappily transitioned, whether they're detransitioned, if you've got people who've dissociated from their sex in some way, every one of those people is someone who needs special accommodation in a sane world where we re-acknowledge the truth of sex. And I mean, the people who've been damaged by it, the children who've been put through this, those people deserve every accommodation we can possibly make. But every one of them is a difficulty.
Yes.
And I mean, I know that sounds heartless. I'm trying to say exactly the opposite of sounding heartless. I'm saying every one of those people for 50, 60, 70 years is going to need things that the rest of us just don't need, because the rest of us are just our sex. So the fewer of those people there are, the better in the sane world that I hope we will reach.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And not just, other things that they are also going to need is people to tell them that actually nobody really does hate them. No one hates them. We have compassion for them. But the trans movement really has done a terrible job saying that everyone hates you. I mean, you see parents like online saying, "Oh, I'm so frightened for my child coming out into a world where everyone hates them." And I'm like, no one hates your kid, man. Like, no one hates your kid. You're just doing this. You're perpetuating the harm by saying this. But saying that, I thought that article in the BBC, was it Patrick
Strudwick, I think, yes,
had written, was quite frightening, because it did show exactly what women had been saying, that this conversion therapy ban is exactly sort of a talking therapy ban. It's just
how stupid are these people?
Anything.
How stupid are they? Their best line was, "We're not criminalizing ordinary talking therapy." Of course we're not. Of course you can continue to practice the way that you always were, then get banned through, and then make it impossible to do anything except affirmation. That was the smart move. But they're so dumb that they have to reveal, while the ban is still in question, that actually a 25-minute Zoom call with a child in which you check whether the two of you can work together by asking some probing questions, and then conclude that no, you can't, which is a very understandable thing. I mean, it's very hard actually for a child who's had an appointment made by their parents. Children do get dragged to therapy. It's kind of pointless. It's what mum and dad want. It's not what they want. They've got to learn the hard way themselves. So, I'm not even saying that this was a surprising outcome. No. This child, the appointment was made by the parents, or the mother, I think. So, I mean, as Hakeem tried a few provocative remarks along the lines of, has it occurred to you that this is a bit like the way that I was when I was a goth? This child says that she was traumatized by it and is still waking up with nightmares several weeks afterwards. And I loved the quote that you can't stop the words from going into your head if you hear them. You don't give consent for hearing things.
Yes, I thought that was actually, it was quite telling, wasn't it? Because it is what the ideology has been trying to do. So
make very, very fragile deaf people. But so that article, that's just the perfect thing to bring to politicians and say, they said that they weren't going after ordinary exploratory therapy and good practice. The things that Hilary Cass said about diagnostic overshadowing and how the memorandum of understanding for psychotherapy was very harmful. Here we are. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but Strudwick and other journalists, I should say, were trolling online for people to get in touch with them if they had any of Stella O'Malley as Hakeem, a bunch of other people as their therapists. Like, there was a list of people circulating on Twitter saying, if any of these have been your therapists, please get in touch. So they went trolling for that story. And that was the worst they could find, as Hakeem asked some questions.
It doesn't sound particularly ethical, does it?
No, it isn't. It isn't. I mean, this girl is now 18, apparently, so she is an adult now. But I mean, Strudwick's talking about something that happened when she was 17. I mean, there's just some ethical considerations there as a journalist.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
Now, she is 18. Let me repeat. She's got the right to tell her own story. She's an adult. There's no special consideration there.
No, absolutely. But simply sort of trolling online and targeting therapists, saying, by
name.
It creates the story, doesn't it? By saying, these are the therapists you have to watch out for. And
I mean,
what it shows is,
and what it shows is that the conversion therapy ban is just the icing on the cake. They've got what they want already, which is that nobody ethical is willing to work with these kids. Like what Hilary Cass said was diagnostic overshadowing, which wasn't an expression I'd come across before. But what she was saying was that as soon as a child who may be autistic, self-harming, eating disorders, ADHD, obsessive compulsive disorder, all these things that we know co-occur with gender dysphoria, once a child like that says the word gender, other doctors go, oh, I don't do gender, we better refer you. And they won't keep working with the child when the child is on the waiting list for the gender clinic. They just leave them because they're afraid to touch a child who says gender. Well, wouldn't you be afraid to touch a child who says gender if this is what could happen to you?
Yes, of course. And I'm assuming that's part of the reason for trolling and writing the story.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
If they can't get it through, then they will do what they will just use the same.
If they were smart.
I mean, honestly, they've only got one tactic, haven't they? Which is
if they were smart, they would have waited.
Silence.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's intimidation. It's straightforward intimidation of people like Az. Yeah. I mean, Az now I think only works with adults and with detransitioners.
And that's such a shame because I think I said last week, I heard him speak last year on a sort of a Welsh woman speak out sort of meeting. And he came across as so thoughtful and so understanding and so knowledgeable. I mean, he's been thinking about this for the last sort of 20 years, it turns out.
And the other specific thing that Az knows much more about than anyone else, because he knows about it personally, is the homophobia that's at the heart of trans ideology. So Az is an out gay man, and a quite flamboyantly out gay man. It wouldn't take you long talking to him to guess that he's gay. And he got a job at the Tavistock at the gender clinic in the 1990s, but they didn't interview him and they didn't realise he was gay. And after he came in, what he understood, gradually, was that they still had these sort of weird Freudian ideas about Oedipal complex and about how being gay demonstrated that you were psychologically a damaged person and you had not grown up properly, and that they believed that if you were gay, you couldn't be a proper therapist. But it was completely fine to be trans because that just meant that you'd got a gender identity that wasn't matched with your sex assigned at birth. But being gay disqualified you. So Az was like really put in the deep freeze when they realised that he was gay. But they were completely happy with him. Completely shocking. This is the late 1990s, early 2000s. So,
it's not that long ago.
Yes, not that long ago, exactly. So this is a man who, it does really annoy me. You hear this even from people who are quite sympathetic and who understand a lot about the trans ideology. They say, oh, I think it's a bit much to say that parents transition their kids because they're homophobes. And they just don't understand how it works. They don't understand how many people are deeply, deeply ashamed, especially of gender non-conforming behavior in boys. And if you have got a boy who's super, super girly, it's kind of easier to think that this is really a girl somehow. And that's definitely not your fault or anything you should do, or you're not going to grow up to have a bloody flaming queer. He's not going to come home with some guy in motorcycle leathers or something, He's just going to grow up to be a good, a nice girl. She's sterile, but there you go. Like, is that your problem? Do you think about your children's sex drive? A bit awkward thinking about that. Okay, so you've got a sterile daughter who isn't going to have any orgasms, but, there you go. Or you can have a boy who's going to be out on the scene and, bringing home who knows what. And
that is a fair point, because even not up to not that long ago, I was thinking, is it really? It must be. I think it's really marginal.
No, I don't. I think it's really central. It's central for the little boys.
I think it is.
Parents they don't even know that that's how they feel. Like, if you were to say to them, "Are you prejudiced against gay people?" they'd say no. But a lot of people who say that actually do feel weird or kind of strange about really highly effeminate behavior in men. And you'll hear people saying, people who, it's not fair to call them prejudiced. They're perfectly nice people, but they'll say things like, I've really nothing against gay people, but why do they have to lisp? Or, why do they all have to wear these sort of clothes, whatever? And the idea of this being your son, and and who he's going to be bringing home and things, and I don't think these thoughts necessarily rise fully to consciousness. And also, the way that when people talk about gay people, they automatically think about sex, whereas, straight people also have sex. It's just that because gay is not the ordinary thing to be, so if somebody says, well, this child might be gay, it's a bit icky. You think what they're saying is like, this child could have sex. And you're not saying that at all. You're talking about what they'll be like as an adult. Like, nobody looks at an ordinarily girly little girl and thinks, oh, she's going to be a heterosexual woman. She probably is, but you don't think about it.
No, I think
So
that's fair.
there's all this weirdness and ickiness and squickiness about
And
the
I
idea
wonder-
that a child is like that.
And I wondered if that's partly why the whole sterilisation thing seems to have almost gone unnoticed, because people don't like to think about the future sexuality of children. And
Absolutely,
so
absolutely. It's very, very hard. And you know, we're such a squeamish nation. I mean, Irish even more than the Brits. But, you know, in the Netherlands, like, people sit down when they're 14, 15 and talk to their parents about what contraception they want to use and whether they think they might have sex with their boyfriend and what would be a good way to make that decision and that sort of thing. And, you know, that's very normalised, and it would be quite normal to go with your mother to the clinic and get your first pill or decide whether you needed a contraceptive implant or whatever. You know, here we sort of just leave it to the teachers who are telling our children all sorts of random crap, you know. But yes, so if you're not going to talk about it, and you know, if you're not going to talk about children's future sex lives, which, by the way, is a kind of weird thing to talk about.
Yes,
I don't want that widely discussed either. I don't want, you know, random adults getting involved, because I think that's the way that the perverts come in.
You know, well, yes, but if I do say to somebody, you know, the future sexuality of this child, another way to silence me is to say, oh my God, you pervert, etc., etc.
Exactly.
It's extremely difficult. I mean, I think there are some, I mean, that's a deliberate attempt to silence.
Yeah, it completely is. And then there's another thing which I don't think is at all common. And so I mean, I really do think the homophobia for little boys is very common. But this one I do not think is common, but I don't think it's unheard of. Do you remember that little boy, Kai Shapley, the one in that awful American documentary called Trans in America, Texas Strong? So a little boy who's, you know, when he's 3, he wears dresses, and his parents are evangelical Christians, and they beat him and, you know, cut his hair short, that one. And at 4, they work out that, you know, he's really a girl. And, you know, she says something more in the film like, you know, now I have a happy, healthy little daughter who loves God and loves her brothers, sort of thing. I look at that woman and I think, you knew he was going to be gay. She says that. She said when he was 2, people started saying to me, I think he's gay. And there's a bit of her that's thinking, you think you're going to be fucking around with men, do you? No, you won't. You know, she's castrating her son rather than having fucking around with men. She's castrating her son.
No, definitely. And now we've even got, you know, you've got Marcy Bowers, I believe, caught on video saying, we don't, you know, well, we've seen this happen. They have no sex lives and no ability to
orgasm, and
are infertile. And I'm thinking, you know, this is huge. This is a major part of your adult life, like a major part of your adult life. And they've taken that choice away. And they're saying it in such a matter-of-fact way, as if to say, okay, well, this has happened to this lot, so we'll experiment a bit for the next lot to see if we can maybe give them a bit. And you're like, how unethical is this? What
I mean, it's beyond unethical. It's really beyond unethical. I don't know if you saw or listened to Stella and Sasha's podcast, these excellent interviews they did on the Gender a Wider Lens series with all these, like what they call the pioneers. And they talked to 2 of the 3 Dutch doctors who had pioneered the what's now called the Dutch protocol, which does, you know, of course, sterilize and, you know, make sexually dysfunctional and so on. And it was absolutely fascinating. It was 2 out of 3 because one of them had retired. The one who'd started or had retired. It was the other 2. And Stella and Sasha ask some quite probing questions along the, you know, well, you say that these people are happy, but like, are they married? Are they in steady relationships? That sort of thing. And the answer is, well, you know, these people were very, 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 very unwell. They're very miserable. So, you know, our baseline for what's okay for a life for them is very, very low. Like, we wouldn't expect them to have marriages or happy relationships or anything like that, you know? What? But this is being sold as a cure. You're saying that, you know, if you let somebody transition, they'll blossom. And now we're being told that, you know, like, okay, you know, you'd give up their fertility, you'd give up their ability to orgasm, you'd give up their health, you'd shorten their life. Doesn't matter if their bones are fragile, because they're really, really miserable people. Yeah, not what I thought I was being told at all.
No, that is extraordinary, because it's not just they're being told it's a cure. It's you know, they've done badly in some aspects, like we were talking about the conversion therapy thing, but they've done extremely well in other ways, like selling the idea that trans is something that you are as opposed to an action that you take.
I think that's because we weren't looking. I don't think they ever did well. I think we just weren't looking. I think they were talking nonsense all the way along, but nobody was looking.
But the government's taken notice. I mean, councils have taken. I mean, Stonewall, I think, because they already had a good name, have done a huge amount of damage and unchecked simply because they were riding.
But they just came in. They came in late. Loads of this has already happened. There was loads of work behind the scenes. I think I do completely agree that they did a great deal of damage and that their good name has been extremely helpful to this body dissociation, sex denialist movement over the last 6 years since they became T inclusive. But they didn't make it. They just wrote it. They just worked out where the next thing was.
Yes. Well, in 2015, I think it's quite well known, isn't it, that they sat down and said, "Are we going to take this on or not?"
Yeah. Where's the money?
Yeah. And they got $100,000 for it.
But it's nothing like, my God, if we could go back in time and just give them $100,000 to sit on their hands.
Yes, Christ, we just crowdfund the shit out of it, wouldn't we? Christ almighty.
We've crowdfunded millions for other things. Have you been watching Alison's hearing?
I've been really shocked, actually, at a lot of it. I mean, as have we all. But the chambers have not come out well, have they? No matter what happens, no. I do feel that we've been given an insight into people, again, who you feel are, people in a position of power that you trust. You go to a barrister when you really are at your sort of, you're vulnerable. You need somebody to represent you in court. This is your one chance. You've waited for years, in all likelihood. It matters hugely. You're spending a lot of money, and yet it turns out that, if this is to be believed, prejudiced and as sort of often unpleasant as a lot of other people. It's been really quite the eye opener.
I mean, part of what we've seen on the garden court front is how badly a lot of employers deal with social media. So, I mean, I've listened to a lot of it because there's a bunch of us are doing, I mean, we can't do a transcript because we're not court reporters, but we're doing as near as we can, like a bunch of fast touch typists. Because, I really hope Alison wins. She deserves to. But I'm not an employment lawyer. I can't tell. These are complicated arguments. No. And she could be right absolutely. In all material respects and still lose. So it's quite important that this effort that she's put in and this enormous sacrifice she's made to get these people under oath, being cross-examined, where they can't just say, "Shut up, you bigot, I'm not answering that question." It's really important that what they say gets out. I wish it could be recorded. It can't be, but I wish it could be because it deserves to be. I mean, some of the highlights. But yeah, so, I mean, we can talk a bit about what the Stonewall people said, a lot of which I was typing. I mean, as I said, the thing that was difficult about the typing was my jaw kept getting in the way of my typing hands, He said, what? That's it. But the last couple of days has been garden court people. And I mean, I haven't been doing all of it by any means, but one of the things you really notice is how badly employers deal with Twitter storms. So it comes down to, if I remember correctly, there's 42 tweets, some of which got investigated. They could just have gone, the trolls are at it again, I mean, a couple of those people had large accounts, but I think one of them they weren't very large. They were people like Stephanie Hayden, and then a bunch of no-hopers with 50 followers and, this sort of bullshit. And they could just have ignored it and it would just have passed. And instead, they got bounced into a response, as far as I can tell. And then that's when you see the prejudice. So they genuinely thought that Alison is genuinely prejudiced. Yeah. So they've, in their mind, there was this absolutely extraordinary thing. So, I mean, maybe people do or don't know, but I've started a newsletter. And so I'm doing it each week from my website, thehelenjoyce.com. And the one's going out tomorrow, which is going to be free for everybody because I want this stuff out there as much as possible, is about the evidence of a woman called Catherine McGahey, who just said the most unbelievable things about, she analogized this idea that a lesbian who would never under any circumstance have sex with a male person. She analogized this like voluntarily. She wasn't bumped into it. She chose these analogies. She analogized it first with men who don't want women to advance at work. Like, she's seeing the lesbian inside her knickers as like the boss who's on the right side of the glass ceiling, right? And the poor, you know, the poor trans woman who's trying to get through this unjustified barrier is like the woman who's approaching the glass ceiling, which is of course what the cotton ceiling is meant to say. But she went big in on this, like really big in on this. And then she said, and it's also like South Africa. You're like, come again? So she didn't say that exactly Alison was like, what's his name? I don't even know how you say it. I've only read it, Eugene Terre-Blanche, like the white supremacist who went around with a machine gun trying to reimpose apartheid. Like, but that's what she was doing. She was saying that's Alison, and the trans women are the liberation movement, the civil rights movement, and we've got to have truth and reconciliation. Again, these are my words. This is me, you know, paraphrasing. But I mean, I was typing bloody hard. I can tell you that. So I can tell you. Yeah. So she kept, and she couldn't see what she was saying. She just couldn't see it. So Ben Cooper, who's Alison's barrister, spent ages trying to get her to understand that the idea was inherently coercive. She was like, no, they could be talking in a non-coercive way. You could be trying to persuade lesbians to accept trans women as partners, but it wouldn't be coercive.
Like, theoretically.
So let me return to South Africa. She literally said it was like that bit where Nelson Mandela got the nation to come together behind the Springboks.
Behind the Springboks, the rugby thing.
She was saying that's an example of non-coercive getting lesbians. How?
How is it possible that somebody can come to this conclusion? Have they just swallowed the light? Did she come to this conclusion by herself? It's an incredibly difficult mindset to put yourself in.
Well, I mean, I'm going to be trying to. I mean, I had to stop writing because I had to start doing my transcribing again. So the newsletter's going out tomorrow. But you know, to give people a preview, like I knew that once you dissociate who's a man and who's a woman from any physical reality, and you just think about the words, and you're not seeing the people in front of you, you can think of the poor trans woman who's so passable and all she wants is to be included in lesbian spaces, but those fucking bitches with their, you know, ridiculous ideology, you know, they just won't accept it because they're mean fucking bitches, right? And then you think of Alex Drummond, and it just doesn't work, you know. Is
it that they simply have never seen an Alex Drummond? I mean, I'd be surprised.
I'd be surprised too.
I mean, they're everywhere. I mean, they really are. Like, you only have to be on Twitter. I
don't know, Helen. I think they tell us that we're prejudiced. They say you're prejudiced when you bring up somebody like Alex Drummond. You're like, well, look, you just keep shifting ground. You know, you're talking about the passable trans woman, which I think basically doesn't exist. But anyway, nearly doesn't, etc. But you know, so you're thinking in this very, very linguistic, abstract terms. So you're thinking about the poor trans woman and these mean bitches of lesbians. And you're not you become completely detached from reality, and you're only talking in linguistic terms. But then the thing I still have to get my head around, and I'm going to have to get up early to write this tomorrow because I think best in the mornings. I realized when I was reading through her words again, how every time Ben said something that was concrete and grounded in reality, and specifically grounded in the reality of the two sexes, she abstracted it. And she depersonalized it. So even with the glass ceiling and with apartheid, she stepped away from who was doing the oppressing and who was doing the who was being oppressed. So she really rephrased both women being held back at work and Black people not having their civil rights in apartheid South Africa. She rephrased these as there was prejudice, there was racism, there was sexism, and people had to come together. You don't end the glass ceiling by making men feel bad, by making them feel bigots. You strategize ways. Like the example she gave was encouraging women to apply more for jobs. So this is sexism without the men. The men aren't doing anything. It's just free floating sexism. And it was the same with the racism. She said, about South Africa, she kept rephrasing it. What was she saying? You know, there had been prejudice and there was still racial tension. And you're like, well, that makes it sound like it was both ways, mate. You know, like it was actually a white minority running the country.
Yes.
So it was all very free floating, as opposed to thinking like, you know, this is a male person who wants to coerce a female person into opening her legs for him. You know, she was like, oh, there is prejudice. There is transmisogyny. Like the most bullshit word.
Yes, it's a terrible word. Honestly, it's ridiculous. But so this is a barrister, presumably.
Yeah, but that's the ideology. I think she didn't look younger than me, but I mean, this bullshit has been taught in universities for an awfully long time. Like, everything's structural. You know, this thing of structural racism.
Structure. Yes.
Yeah. So when I heard this first, I thought what they were saying is there's racism, and that racism is baked into the structures of our society, which is completely true. It absolutely is. Like, the way that things are run. Like, if you look at who owns what, you know, why in America black families break up more, that sort of thing. It's very structural. So for a long, long time, I thought these people were talking about that. And then people would criticize them, and I would think it was very unfair to criticize them. But now I realize that they're talking about a sort of a matrix, an invisible matrix around us. And it's not people at all. We're all slotted into this invisible power structure thing.
Now we're all victims.
Yeah, we're all victims, and none of us have agency. So she's talking about racism, sexism, and this bloody bullshit about trans misogyny as structural things with no agents. And if that's the way you think, and you've got these poor trans women slotted in the victims sort of slot, they're not even people. They're just placeholders. She's not thinking about Alex Drummond as a bloke who's having a great time LARPing for some reason. Who's gone very quiet recently, by the way. But
ages. He
isn't doing it anymore, is he?
No. Who knows? He's probably
back in trousers now.
Moved on to something else. Yes, but that's a very, very interesting point about the it's depersonalized. The whole thing is just abstract and theoretical.
And she did it straight away, almost reflexively, to every question. Like, I was looking through the transcript, and it's not a transcript, but you know what I mean. And at every point, immediately she just rephrased the things as, yes, there's prejudice, yes, there has been racism, yes, there's continuing prejudice. You're like, is this in the air or something? or do you mean that there's white blokes in pickup trucks, rampaging around through the townships, terrorizing black people? Because that's what I remember from the end of apartheid. No, there's racism. Both sides.
That is quite, that is a really, really interesting point there. But how
do you get through to her?
Get that? Well, yes, exactly.
I think we can't. I think this woman's lost. Like, she was under oath. She was not lying. She really, really, really wasn't lying. She couldn't hear what Ben was saying. And there were a couple of extraordinary moments where he was talking about shaming. And what he was trying to say is that coercion isn't always violence and the threat of violence. Sometimes it's the threat of other things, for example, shaming. So he was talking about shaming lesbians. And she answered, seeming to think that he was talking about shaming trans women. It's like...
Is it that she is simply, I think I used to, when I first started work, or not actually first started work, maybe when I made friends at work, and we'd argue about things. And I'd say to them, like, you can genuinely take a abstract position on anything I say because you are white, rich men, and you have nothing personal to fight for. It is everything, every argument that I bring up about feminism, page 3, whatever, you can answer it in entirely theoretical. And I'm wondering if this is this sort of part of it for her. Everything is theoretic because she actually doesn't feel, she's got to the top of her career. She's, she now feels that she's sort of, she can just look down and say,
so I didn't get that impression. I didn't get that impression from her. I mean, of course, she's not the target of the Julie Bindel style of feminism. Like, Julie says she doesn't care whether there's a glass ceiling. What she cares about is the fact that there are women being smashed in the face and kicked out of their homes and in need of refuge and being raped on the streets and having to sell sex to survive and things like that. Like, that's the bit of women's lives that Julie's interested in.
And she does that. She does that.
Yeah, and that's what she does. Of course, she's dedicated her life to it. So, I mean, I've even heard her say she just doesn't care. And I mean, I don't think she really means exactly that. I mean, that she thinks there's better.
No, but she doesn't care to spend. Yeah, exactly. And that makes complete sense, doesn't it?
So I think that Catherine McGahey, I mean, I don't know her. I mean, she could have had a very hard life for all I know. But I would say that she, and I would say me too, because of the way my life has gone, probably over-focused on the glass ceiling aspect of things. And the thing is that when you are a woman in, male-dominated, or you've done well in your career, and I mean, this is me too, many of your friends, they're your colleagues. Some of them are the people who have supported you in work and things. You don't want to say, I am held back, and sometimes you're not held back. It's very complex. And it's not very wise to actually, like, it's better to focus,
absolutely.
it's better to focus on the sort of the consciousness raising, like helping women to ask for raises, instead of thinking like, what's the structural thing that's happening here? And here's me using the word structural, but by structural, I mean things like maternity pay. Are we supporting women to take a full year out and then to come back and be supported back in? Like, that's my idea of sensible structural, not this free floating sort of sexism.
Yes, absolutely, because that's something you can actually do something about. I mean, it makes, I think, it does make a lot of sense, doesn't it, to focus on something that you think, something small that you can change. I remember when I'm harking back to the Normal Page 3 campaign, and only because I just downloaded my Twitter archive on the weekend, because I was, now things are moving on. And and you get older and you forget when did this happen? When did this happen? I thought that I'd seen this in around sort of 2011, but actually looking at my Twitter, it's very 2013 is all Normal Page 3, and then beginning of 2014, it is, that's the first time I used the words sort of TERF. And I know in the middle there, I got myself an anonymous account because I'd already seen at that point that women were getting vilified. But anyway, that's an aside. So I'm thinking back for the Normal Page 3 campaign. That was the first time I'd really done anything like that. And what was interesting about it was that it was focused. It had an aim, and that aim was to get Page 3 out of the sun. And in doing that, lots of other questions and interesting sort of ideas came along, and it enabled me to think about things and to read things, etc. But it was focused, and it had an aim, and then that aim was done, and then I moved on to other things.
You wouldn't have been somebody who, when you were asked, I'll tell you another thing I noticed looking through it. So, I mean, most of Catherine McGahey's testimony was about this word coerce, because the thing is, she had found, as the vice chair of the Bar Standards Board, she had given it as her opinion that Alison's tweet about the cotton sealing workshop by Morgan Page was likely to breach the Bar Standards Board's standards. Now, that wasn't a finding. She was asked for her advice, and Alison was told she should take it down, and Alison refused to, and there were no consequences. But anyway, she said that on the basis of the word coercion. Alison had said that the very idea of the cotton sealing workshop is coercion. So for anyone who doesn't know about this bloody workshop, which has become notorious, it was held by this trans woman called Morgan Page under the auspices of Planned Parenthood. Morgan Page is Canadian, but now lives in London and works for Stonewall. Small world. And the idea of it was, by direct analogy with the glass ceiling, to get trans women together to strategize overcoming the cotton ceiling, the barriers to trans women getting laid by lesbians. And it really uses those words: barrier, overcome, strategized. And Alison characterized this in a tweet as coercion. So Catherine McGahey brought her entire training as a barrister to bear on defending her, saying that the word coercion was not justified. And she then had to talk about three groups on the wrong side of a barrier, namely Black South Africans, women in work, and trans women in lesbian dating spaces, as people who could get what they wanted without coercion. Now, one of these things is not like the others, you see.
No.
So she's trying to talk about Black South Africans and women, women's long history for rights, and saying, and they could do it all without coercion. You're like, I think there was a fair bit of, throwing your weight around at various points, because we had right on our side. And then, you see, the reason she has to say that the trans women aren't being coercive is because it's bloody rapey. Like,
yes,
what this wretched cotton sealing workshop makes me think of is, have you seen these pickup artists? Do you know these guys?
Oh yes. I actually, there was a guy I used to sit next to at work. He went on these courses. He used to talk to me about it way back in the sort of noughties, that before I'd even sort of thought about all of this stuff. He went on a course with one of them, and it was all about negging and how to all this. I was at the time I was like, oh, this is interesting. It's only after thinking back I'm like,
that was freaky. That was really, really creepy of them. Yeah. And it is coercive. I mean, the word coercive is a word that has changed in its understanding over the last 10 years, and I think rightly, like we now have this idea of coercive control, like, you know, domestic relationships, usually men, you know, keeping women under the thumb by things like, you know, constantly putting them down, you know, checking up on them 500 times a day, that sort of thing. Even if the woman never has any justified fear that he's going to punch her, because it's not a man who's ever punched her, it may still be coercive. And that's recognized now in law. And so,
Yes.
I mean, you know, some of the pickup artist things are just like, you know, keep clean, go to the gym and work out, dress well, you know, sort out your own self-esteem issues. Like, they're not bad advice, actually. But mostly what it's about is, as you say, negging, which is, you know, backhanded insults.
Somebody asked. Yes, sorry. Somebody's asked what negging is in.
Yeah, so it's short for negative, I think. It's when you give a woman a compliment that's actually an insult. So you say something like, "Oh, they're nice nails. Are they real?" Or you know, "That's an interesting hair color. Wouldn't have chosen it myself," but you know, that sort of thing. So you're putting her down.
Yes, and it's a way of making her feel just sort of, you know, a little bit
less
vulnerable.
confident, more vulnerable, exactly. You know, more off balance, that sort of thing. So it's all I mean, some of these techniques are bullshit. They're based on neurolinguistic programming, which is bullshit. It's like the use of language that's meant to be, you know, that infallibly you can get people to do what you want them to do by using words the right way, you know. But the aim is to get, you know, if only the aim is to get women into bed who don't want to get into bed with you. That's the aim of it. And I mean, you know, the full pickup artist thing is coercion. So yeah, if you understand, you know, the cotton ceiling is just pickup artistry for trans women. That's all it is.
Yes, so, and in fact, and it was even reasonably. I mean, to be fair, it was quite a long time ago, you know. And at that time, like I was saying to you, a colleague of mine would talk openly about it.
So this was 2019, I think, this workshop. So, you know, I think some people already noticed it. Like, I remember seeing stuff about that workshop, and Planned Parenthood had to put out a statement about it. And they said, you know, there was no coercion involved and no coercion discussed.
God, but I'm not entirely surprised that it was done, because that was the sort of thing that was going on in
it's still going on.
Men's world.
Yeah, it's called PUA, pickup artists. PUA. Artists. All these PUAs guys are still doing their thing big time. And, you know, women say it's disgusting, or, you know, it's part of rape culture or whatever. All of this is true. It doesn't get us anywhere. So, you know, Alison is just talking about the lesbian equivalent, which is, you know, trans women who are men getting together to discuss strategizing, getting into lesbians' knickers in the way that other men
because men are doing this sort of thing. Men do this sort of thing, which is why we know absolutely well. It's one of the reasons that it's very, very obvious. I mean, this is not something that women do. I'm going to actually go out on a limb and say that there are no workshops for women to how to pick up men that don't want to have sex with you to have sex with you.
To be fair, Helen, if you just go into a bar and look around and say, "Who wants to shag me?" you'll get a few. So, you know, the situation is so different for men and women.
Yes,
you know,
exactly. You don't need a workshop. You just
if you're available, you'll get someone. You know, sort of thing.
You just can't drink. Yes. It's very true. So yes, I think so. Going back to how we started here, yes, I agree. I think that part of this thing for Alison, this tribunal, is to get the message out there.
Yeah.
Because as you say, it is complex, and you know, we're all reading it and we're all saying, well, this sounds really quite bad to me. I don't know. I have absolutely no idea about employment law, and it's going on for a really long time. There's a lot of evidence. But that's a great thing about it, isn't it? There's a lot of stuff being said, and it's really shocking. The other great stuff was the
Stonewall stuff. The Stonewall stuff was just great. Oh, Lord, I'm so glad I did Kieran Metcalf. It was just such a day. So Kieran is the head of trans inclusion, is a trans man, so I'm going to call her she, if that's all right with you.
Fine by me.
Came back after lunch, and I think it was after lunch, maybe it's after a break anyway, because they often, when they change witness, is a good point for a break because everyone's in different rooms. It's all being heard remotely. So Kieran is there in camera, and Ijeoma Omambala, who is the QC who's representing Stonewall, she's somewhere else, like she's just in a different room. And so she did this brilliant thing of trying to pass off the fact that there were other people in the room, with Kieran Metcalf, as if this was just a minor detail. So she says, Kieran Metcalf's here, head of script, has a support person in the room. And Ben said, we haven't had that discussed. Can we have a case management hearing about that? She's like, what do you mean case management? And the judge wants to move things along because we're really running late. So the judge said, all right, can we just have the support person in shot? And Ben said, what sort of support person is it? And she said, and Ijeoma does this thing of going, what is this stupid question? She has this brilliant, what is your stupid question face? And she went, emotional support person. She nearly said, you fool, at the end of that. It's just absolutely classic. And so the judge said, can you move the emotional support person in shot? And Ijeoma said, and I'm not joking, sorry, the reason I call this person Ijeoma is I know someone who knows her, who talks about her as Joe. Anyway, Ms. Omambala, I should say. She said, we'll have to move the camera to get them all in. And in the hearing, all the people who are watching are muted, but the QCs for Garden Court and for Stonewall are unmuted in case they need to intervene, as is Alison's QC, and as are the judge and the 2 other people on the tribunal. So there's 6 people who are not muted. And I think all 6 of them simultaneously, apart from Ijeoma's room, said, all of them? It was the most extraordinary moment. And then the camera went and then we all went to mute. And then 5 minutes later, we came back. They had rearranged the room, and Ijeoma Mwambala did the same thing again of what are these people putting me through with their ridiculous demands? She said, well, we have reduced the number in the room, and the support person had gone. This is presumably a friend of Kieran Metcalf's who had not signed up to be on camera. And we now had Kieran's mum sitting behind her. And we had this sort of person that we could see just the ear of, who is described as technical support. Now, it's actually very, very hard to deal with the bundles. The bundles are really 6,000 plus pages.
Yes,
so I actually don't think that's a stupid
understanding
thing.
This.
Yeah, to have somebody who's constantly getting your page for you. And then Omabala said, and there's a dog in the room. Mad people, you want to know these minor details, there's a dog in the room. And so then later on, the judge said, can we see the technical support person? And this person's face came more into view. Bloody hell, it was the effing solicitor. It was Stonewall's solicitor. And they've been not mentioning this fact. Now, she wasn't doing anything she shouldn't have been doing. I'm not saying that. It's come on.
Yeah, come on. I was really hoping that you were going to say that the judge said, can we see the dog? And everyone was like,
the judge did say things about the dog, but I thought that was just awful because that's just business. This is just bullshit. This is bullshit. This person is on a 40+ K a year job.
Yes.
Managing people.
Yes.
And I thought seriously, she's just not well. She's really not well. I mean, it's not about having reasonable adjustments. If you're anxious, you might need to bring your dog. I get that. If you're somebody one of the other people, also the other trans person from Stonewall, said that they were dyscalculic, which means that you're not good with numbers. And I mean, I can believe that. That's fine. Get someone to do the pages for you. But this thing of needing a cast of thousands around you, what does she do at work? So she said stuff. She was such an idiot. She really was. And she didn't understand that her job is to say as little as possible to Ben and then to agree with absolutely everything that Hockhauser, who's Stonewall's QC, said. So I did the stint in the morning, it wasn't the morning, whichever stint anyway it was that Kieran was doing for Ben. She was happily agreeing to it all. It was extraordinary. Ben was like, so you think that it must be transphobic to say that a trans woman is male? And she was like, yeah, it's transphobic and it's not right. And then Ben would say, and is that the Stonewall position? She's like, yes, that's the Stonewall's position. So she just kept agreeing to everything Ben said. And then apparently I didn't do the Hockhauser bit, just kept arguing with him. Didn't understand that her job is just to agree with Stonewall.
No, that was really odd. The whole thing. I mean, I was thinking, I sort of flipped between feeling bad for her and then remembering that no, Stonewall. This is Stonewall. This is somebody in a position of massive influence. Look what they've done.
They were trying to throw her under the bus. Very interesting. So she'd only been at Stonewall 5 weeks when she sent this extraordinary letter to Garden Court after Alison's tweets about the LGB Alliance launch. So she sent this letter that came out in Discovery, in which Alison published a good while ago, and people may well have seen it. It says, I paraphrase, it says, nice chambers you got here, shame if anything should happen to it. Talks about Alison's connection with yourselves. Kieran has a very odd speech pattern. her connection with yourselves makes it difficult for us to work with you. So Karen said, and possibly quite sincerely, that what she had meant by that was that she would never have been able to bring a trans person into Garden Court, and they were going to be hosting events for trans people in Garden Court. She seriously said that if she were to bring a trans person into Garden Court, Alison might be there, and this person might experience violence, and they might not be able to use the toilet. You know, this picture of Alison Bailey lurking behind a toilet door.
Well, I honestly, I thought that came across so badly. I mean,
yeah,
she said, "Oh, maybe we should be on a different floor." She was
exactly. Alison, maybe
saying
Alison,
that a black lesbian,
a middle-aged lesbian,
segregated away from them on a different floor. Like I thought, how is it possible that you're saying this out loud without hearing how it's coming out, man?
Well, it's the same person who said that there's no biological sex, that trans women aren't male, that trans women do not have male bodies, they have trans women's bodies, that it's not possible to identify what sex anybody is. Biological sex is a mixture of characteristics. Biological sex changes through the lifespan.
You've got a good memory.
Well, I mean, I wrote it up, so I can, you know, if you when you publish this, you might want to put some links in. You know, I wrote up an article on it, but we also published. We published the highlights of Kieran's statement on Kieran's evidence on sex matters, because it was so bonkers, you know. But yes, so Kieran was saying that you know, if a trans woman went into the toilets at Garden Court and Alison was there, they might experience violence. So when you remember that the trans woman is male and Alison is female, you realise how stupid this is, you know. But anyway, Kieran's just drunk the Kool-Aid. So yes, so what was the other one that Kieran did? Oh, yeah, so it was 5 weeks. 5 weeks Kieran had been there, right? And then the way it works is you get cross-examined and then you get re-examined by your own side. So Jane Russell, who's the junior for Stonewall, re-examined Kieran. And I'm sure Jane is a very knowledgeable barrister, but she talks like a CBeebies presenter. She goes, "So, Mr. Metcalfe," and she dialed it up to 11 for her, and she just basically, and Kieran was too stupid to see it, was trying to present it as that Kieran had been freelancing. So she was like, "So you used to work in the anti-LGBTQ plus hate? Oh," like this, you know, she's talking like that. And Kieran's like, "Yeah. So would you say that you're very committed to this, like so committed, so personally committed?" And Kieran's going, yeah, so dumb. So yeah, so basically that was the idea, was to present this as Kieran had sent this off without talking to anyone else at Stonewall. And Kieran's like, yeah.
That's
oh God, it was something else. I'm so glad I watched it, but I've got very little done in the last 2 weeks.
It's a shame that it's not been recorded, though, isn't it? I'm
glad.
God,
yes.
I've been able to actually tell us on camera how some of it went down, but that it is a shame, because you know, I mean, one of the things that we really do need is for the wider public to understand that it isn't all vulnerable. I mean, to be fair,
they are very vulnerable. Kieran Metcalfe and Sian Canan are very vulnerable people, but they're a mixture of vulnerable and vicious.
Well, and powerful.
Yes. So Kieran, I mean, would you imagine you're a young woman who's 5 weeks into a new job at a charity with a good name, like Stonewall. Like, I mean, we don't think it's got a good name, but it still has a good name. Like, that's a great job to land. Head of trans inclusion. 5 weeks in, you see some tweets you don't like, and you send an email to all the heads of chambers, and I think other people at one of the biggest barristers' chambers in Britain, saying, you know, like, not even in good grammar and like proper English, saying, you know, associating with this woman is going to cause a problem for us. You know, you might like to rethink it. Like, I wouldn't do that now.
No, I was thinking exactly the same thing. I was thinking, you know, if I send an email at work, I really consider my words. I consider the message I'm sending. What am I saying? Who am I saying it to?
Well, Kieran said she did do that.
Very careful.
She said she left it for some days. But I suppose,
dear God,
who the fuck do you think you are, child? Like,
yes.
Bailey, a barrister, a woman with her gravitas and standing and so on. Like, yes, okay, everybody is open to criticism. Everyone can say what they think. But do you really think? You know, do you not think that you should maybe check out whether you're on the right side here?
Yes, but I still think. I mean, the insult about, you know, we're not safe. We're not safe. We might not be safe. I mean, that's almost fucking libelous, isn't it?
It is, but if you think about it, Kieran is a man who thinks she's a woman. So presumably she's using men's spaces.
No, wait. The other Kieran is a woman who thinks she's a man.
Sorry, yes. Yeah, Kieran is a woman who thinks she's a man. So she goes and uses men's spaces where she is putting herself in danger all the time. And trying to pretend, trying to conceal that fact from herself. So I don't think that's not relevant. I think that's what she thinks of when she thinks about using the wrong toilets.
Oh, that's interesting. So, because it occurs to me that not all women who identify as trans would use, say, changing rooms.
I know, but I think Kieran is a head case. So,
okay, oh, that's very interesting. Yeah. So
I don't know that she does, but anyway, I mean, she was full on with the, you can't tell what sex people are. There is no such thing as sex. Sex is whatever you say it is. So,
well. Cheers to Alison for doing it, and all of you for doing all of the transcribing.
I cannot wait. Jesus, it is so tiring. It really is. Like, it's fascinating, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's been hours of endless arguments about how barristers do their billing. It's like I understand this is important for any damages, but are we going to talk about how Alison records her holidays again?
Oh, but even that, isn't it? I mean, you've laid yourself sort of open and vulnerable to the world. So I have to say, I mean, fair play to her for doing it.
It's really been awful for her. I cannot. She's a very private person, Alison. I don't know her well, and that's part of my point. I see her at things sometimes, and she hasn't reached out, as far as I know, to many people for support to talk things through. I just think she keeps things close to herself, and I don't think that's surprising when you know anything about her history. But what she's been through and what she suffered is pretty extreme, and I think it's made her somebody who's deeply private. Yes,
I think that that's fair. So when you think of it, that was even worse, isn't it?
It is.
That people are talking about you as if you're like a truly horrible, frightening, dangerous person. It's such a. I get it on Twitter a tiny bit. People saying, "Oh, she's a horrible bully," etc. And I look at myself and I think, "Yeah, no, I'm just not."
One of the really awful bits was her office mate recorded her secretly and handed over the transcripts to Garden Court Chambers, like her sides of phone calls. Can you imagine that? Like, would you ever trust anyone again?
No, that's such a violation, isn't it? A violation of your trust, your friendship, your privacy. It's so disappointing.
Yeah.
Such a disappointing thing. Oh, well, anyway, so she's won, regardless of the outcome. I think she's won.
Well, I doubt she'll feel like that, I have to say. But, what we can do is do our best to say.
For the wider, personally, maybe not, but for the wider movement of women and girls, I think certainly a big contribution to.
Yeah, I agree with that completely.
Just sort of opening the ideology up, examining it, people having to examine it, people being able to see it.
And this impact of getting outside groups coming in, which isn't just, by the way, LGBT stuff. Like, when you sign up to these things thinking that they're a way of signaling your virtue, which is what employers are always looking for. They're always looking to say, we are green, we are equal, we're good for this, that, and the other. Yes. They don't actually want to do anything about it. They don't actually want to, decarbonize their supply chain.
No. They just want to give people rainbow lanyards and say we're inclusive. Oh, so of course, it's the easiest way.
But once you get them in, it's not actually that easy, because what these people do is they create indexes and then they measure you against the index, and you've given them the power to set all sorts of things and to make you look bad if you don't do them. And those things aren't necessarily your, in your interests, or things that make any sense for you, or that are, in any way relevant, or even the right things for the outcome that you're saying you want. And yet, too bad for you. You're the fool who let them in the door.
Yes.
I'd kick out this whole EDI and, corporate social responsibility and things. I would just kick it all out, because I think on the whole, on balance, it's very bad.
Yes.
And then let companies do it.
Point. Yeah. Yes. I mean, I think that's one of the things that has struck me about this, is that I've become so much more aware of sort of dangers sort of lurking in terms of, what's the word? A little Trojan horse, maybe, should we
Exactly.
say?
It was very Trojan horse. I have to just I know we're coming up to our hour, but I have to tell you this afternoon.
No, go for it, man.
God, they spent about 20 minutes with Hockhauser insisting that he never used Twitter and asking to have the most painful things explained to him. It was like the worst seminar on Twitter that you've ever heard done incredibly slowly. So he's got this quite posh voice. He's quite he thinks quite highly of himself, and why shouldn't he use a QC? But he was saying things like, so if you open up the bundle at page 5927, there is a screen capture of a tweet on this page. And if you look underneath, there is a speech bubble. May I ask what the purpose of this speech bubble is? And then some terrible explanation of this. And then next to it, there is a heart. And then that was explained to him too. And he's like, so, and then they took himself and David Jimenez's, who's the Twitter, very bad Twitter and marketing guy for Garden Court, was trying to explain to him the difference between locking down your account and blocking people. And I was there going like, God, give me patience. Like, did none of them learn how Twitter worked? Like maybe a year ago. A year ago, yes. You knew you were doing this bloody hearing that was hinging on what was said on Twitter. I wonder, was it strategic?
There's only 4 things. Like you tweet, you reply, you can like, you can block.
Well, there was a bunch of stuff about who gets to see what. Like they kept saying, like, are you publishing this on Twitter? It was the most painful bit of boomerism I've ever seen. It really was. So I still wonder, was it deliberate? Was it an attempt to run the clock down a bit? Because I mean, this hearing could run out of time, and that would be catastrophic.
What would happen? Would just finish?
This would finish it, and then next year, when there's time in the calendar, like in a year's time or something, they come back for like 2.5 people.
Oh no, it has to finish, doesn't it? Yeah.
Well, it may not. Not if they spend 20 damn minutes explaining how the like button works.
Honestly, at that point, you're just going to say, look, if you don't know how it works, then just have shit. We're just.
I was waiting for the judge. I really was waiting for the judge. The judge should have said at that point, Mr. Hockhauser, could you read a tutorial on Twitter in your own time and then come back with any questions or something? I don't know. Yeah.
So listen, before we finish, I do want to say, so now that your book is in paperback, it's come out in paperback. Do you do you have any idea about sort of sales and how it's going? And
I don't know totals, but it's like really, really good. Like I went to the 10th anniversary of my agent was last Thursday. I went to a party with a lovely turf corner at it. It was great. There were about 8 of us. Caroline's partner came over and I said, oh, do you do the MRAs? Which was very, very unfair to her. She does not do the MRAs. But anyway, yes, that was great. And some of the people at the publishers came over and said, oh, this is amazing how well this is done and things like people I didn't know. So yeah. So great. It's doing really well.
Brilliant. And so that's brilliant for you personally, but also, of course, it's amazing that people are learning. People are understanding and learning what's going on. I mean, you've done such a brilliant job with that book.
Thank you.
I mean, I've seen people saying, "Oh, I'm reading it for the second time now," and I'm thinking, actually, that is something you could do, isn't it? Because you can go back and you can think, like, now that things have moved on a bit more, you can go back and get sort of refresh yourself with the ideas in it. Would you do anything different if you'd written it again now? I mean, have things sort of moved on enough that you would change some of the content?
I mean, I'm sure that I would just say things a bit differently because I understand things a bit better now. I would have had to find a way to work in the poor teenage boys who are transitioning now. Like it didn't fit in my structure. But it's a huge thing, and it's a thing I didn't even know was happening until I was nearly finished writing. Like there's this kind of, there's this thing where I bring people by the hand through the reasons that people transition. And there were just the 2 original reasons why men transition. Like there's the highly effeminate little boys, and there's the middle-aged men. And the little boys grow up into be gay young men who also transition. So it's basically 2 reasons, yeah? And that's Blanchard's typology. And then there's the women who, until very recently, were a handful of butch lesbians, and now it's the ROGD girls. But what I didn't know was there were ROGD boys in quite large numbers. And they are a new phenomenon, and they're driven by the internet. They're driven by games, by porn, very much by porn, and by just the body dissociation thing. And they may be gay or straight. It's not about sexuality. It's about dissociation. Amazingly, it's about not wanting to be a cis white straight male because that's the lowest possible thing you can be. I would have made more about the religious undertones of all of this. And this isn't me bashing at religion. Religion can be beautiful or it can be terrible. You know, it can be Aztec sacrifice, and it can be.
But presumably, the religion part of it is more focused towards America. I mean, they are much more.
No, it is in itself.
No?
It is a very religious thing that you're doing. You're being reborn. You're sloughing off your past self, who's a cis white straight male or whatever. You know, you're getting a new name. You know, it's very baptismal, transitioning, and then thinking about forgiveness or not forgiveness. Like, it's a religion that does not forgive at all. Like, the way apostates, namely detransitioners, are treated is disgusting.
Yes.
And just like, there's child sacrifice. You know, a lot of religions have child sacrifice, and here we have one. It's not normal to scarify your body like that. It's not normal to cut your breasts off, like to put the evil of you and the world into your breasts and then cut them off. Like, that's a very religious idea. Again, I mean, a horrible religion, you know. So I would have made more about that. And the more I see it, the more it disturbs me. Yeah. So it is a disgusting neo-religion.
I hadn't really considered it that way, but you're right.
So there's a woman called Colette Colfer who wrote a short and very good article for the Irish Times about gender ideology as a religion. It was commissioned by them. She writes about religion for them, and they didn't publish it. Like, it went to press. She went to bed one night thinking.
I mean, I'm doing this and I'm thinking, yeah, of course they didn't publish it.
Yeah.
I mean,
so she has published it in a small online. I mean, small. It's reasonable in Ireland, called broadsheet.ie, so you can read it, and it's so measured.
We'll put a link. Let's put a link to it.
Yeah. So Colette Colfer in broadsheet.ie, and you know, like, it's 800 words or something. It's just her saying, as somebody who's a scholar of religion, the way that this is a new religion, and the Irish Times chickened out.
Oh, that's disappointing, isn't it? But again,
unsurprising.
Not surprising.
Yeah.
But now that Ricky is taking the bull by the horns, although
the Irish Times will be 10 years after everybody else.
Well, that's, I suppose. But Ricky Gervais, I mean, I was thinking, you know, the secret of good comedy is timing, and he's timed it well, isn't he?
He has.
He's waited. Yes, poor O'Grey was way too early. But Ricky's waited until, you know, people understand all the terms, they've seen what's going on. But he's like the first. Well, him and Bill Maher. I mean, there was obviously a bit of a competition. Dave Chappelle, you know, it's all happening now. People are, I think, you know, he's sort of crested the wave.
Yeah,
like, there's bound to be people coming after him now. I mean,
anyone can say what they like.
It's done now. They can say what they like. Yes.
Yeah. To saying what you like, Helen.
Yes, to saying what you like. Helen, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me on.
It's just gone so quickly. I mean, we've
gone over time. Yeah,
absolutely. And thank you so much for everyone who's joined in the comments. And I just wanted to say hello to the girl who is having to do her exams at home because she was bullied. I know for a fact that she is watching us tonight. So cheers to you and good luck with your exams. And
good
thank
luck.
you, Helen. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Talk to you soon. Okay, bye.